And we are live. Look at that. Everything appears to be working. Let's look at that. All right. Move that out of the way, this over the way. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We are here on today's pre-show of today's Security Plus study group. In about 10 minutes, less than now, we will be starting the study group. This is the pre-show where I check cameras. I look at all these crazy things in front of me and make sure that everything is working the way I would expect. And so far, it certainly is. Hope everybody's doing well. It is a holiday week here in the United States. So folks are planning to celebrate Thanksgiving this week. So this should be a relatively laid back and subdued Security Plus study group. Will it be, though? We'll find out in a bit. I, of course, have all new questions for you. So it's the same study group we always do. From my perspective, we'll have to see how it goes with everybody else's perspective. So let's do a quick check. We are recording. I've already done the podcast intro. I can give you the URL. There it is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. You can answer questions there, and you can submit your virtual pin into our digital pin cushion here. Let's see if we got a better look at that. There it is. That's what we're looking at. So you can plug in where you happen to be in the world, and you can see where other people are connecting from as well. So much to go through here. Hope everybody's doing well. Well, a new version of Security Plus comes out in 26. Yeah, in a year from now, like November timeframe, like October timeframe. There's no rushing. You don't have to worry about hurrying up. You've got plenty of time. There won't be another Security Plus for quite a while. You've got plenty of time. There's nothing worried there. Who's even saying anything about 26 at this point? Who's even mentioning those? Your ID for Vevox is what you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Just pop open a new browser and head to that URL, and you'll go directly to the right place. Vevox no longer supports an app, a single app on a mobile device, so you will not be using that to connect, so you don't need an ID. Makes it very easy, doesn't it, to make that happen? Oh, let's see what else. Cameras are looking good. Audio is set up. We've got connections online. You folks are here. What more do we need? What more do we have to make this happen? Well, we're all sort of getting ready for the big holiday season. Thanksgiving sort of kicks things off. I guess if you're sort of the purist, maybe it's more like Halloween kicks things off. But for the rest of us that aren't quite Halloween-y, we're sort of more into the later on in the year, then Thanksgiving is sort of the beginning of handling all of the things that come with the holiday season. Both good and maybe sometimes not as good. This is sort of good. We should work that. We'll find out. All right, we got a few minutes before we get started, approximately 6.5. We'll get things going here. We have a lot to go through. Today, I have all new questions for you for Security Plus, so that'll be fun. And if you have a question for me, you can always submit your question in the after show. Use the URL that's right here behind me, professormesser.com/QA, and you can do that as well. How are we doing on cameras? Cameras, I'm just going to kind of cycle through. Make sure, oh, that camera's not even on. There it is. Get that laptop. There we go. There it is. That looks pretty good. And we're back. I think it all worked out pretty well. So far, everything is fine. Make this happening. We'll have to figure it out. We got a lot of folks checking in from all over the place. We have also questions today that I give you in the first hour. The second hour questions you submit. So in the second hour, you can submit a question by going to professormesser.com/QA and hitting the tab at the top of the screen and submitting the questions there as well. So you got some options. You got things you can do. You got a lot you can work through. Got all of these questions ready to go. Lots going on there. Thanks, everybody, for checking in. I know on a holiday week, it's sometimes a challenge to lock in to these events that I've scheduled. This has been kind of a crazy month for me because we sort of done all our live streams in the last 2 weeks of the month, which is something we never do. We usually will have a few every week, one or two, maybe one a week. for Network Plus and Security Plus. So we've been super busy getting all of these going, which has been kind of fun, actually, for a change. We sort of, last week was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, wasn't it? Of live streams. That was a little much. On a Monday morning, getting up, preparing for my live stream on a Monday was interesting. And we used to do all of our live streams on the weekends. They used to be a Saturday live stream, and we would just do one every Saturday. But time frames, the timing of that did not work out the way I was hoping. So during the week seems to work much better for what we are doing. It also helps that I have time during the week to do it now before I did not. So there's always a combination of things we're working through. I'll have to figure out the details. All right. Well, we've got a few minutes before we get started, 4 minutes before we get things going. I did not see my info pop up on the screen with the details of this. What is today? Oh, no, it did. It gave me something in my my Discord there. So it is working the way I would expect. That says excellent. So I like that part of it. And we'll have to see what our answers are for this one. Well, I cover the labs. Which labs are you referring to? If you're referring to performance-based questions, we will be talking about those. And I do have a performance-based question for you today, as I do with every live study group. So certainly, we will have that available for you. We got a lot. Yes, text giving. That's probably what we should call it. This is the part where we become, if you have worked your way out of the help desk, the holiday season dragged you back into it when you visit the family. So that's one of those challenges that you suddenly turn into a tech support person at that point. I've gotten very good at redirecting. Like, oh, that sounds like something that your local tech person should deal with. Oh, you don't want me touching that. No, I'm not that great at Windows. It never seems to work out. I never can quite get that right. But it has helped through the years. And my idea of just converting everybody over to Mac OS didn't work out either. So I had great ideas, had great plans, didn't work out so well. Just to minimize the level of support. You know what I mean? Just to have a little bit different support requirement for all of those. Hopefully we can get some of this done today. We'll prepare you for the turkey and the stuffing and the tech support tickets from the family. How do you get the iPad to do this? How can I get my laptop not to do that? That'll be, I'm sure there'll be something that comes up for me on this live stream today. We'll have to figure it out. We'll know that there are a few. I know that if you are someone who is planning to take these exams, it should be easy to do it before the end of the year. Somebody was mentioning Security Plus timeframes, and in the beginning of this, we'll talk about timeframes for Security Plus and when you would expect a new Security Plus exam to appear and really lock it down a little bit better. I think there's some confusion out there because that's what the internet does really, really, really well. It gives you just enough information to confuse things. It's getting kind of cool in here. It is warm here in Central Florida, so I have the air conditioner on and maybe on a little bit too much. Make that happen. We got about a minute to go before we get started. Minute and 5 seconds, if we want to be specific. See the big, I've got this big, this clock here. It's an app, but one of the problems I have with this particular app, and I don't know if it's related to the app or it's related to the underlying advertising API that they use, gives me a lot of malware links, a lot of spammy malware, phishing-ish links. I got one that was a fake pop-up the other day. I got a screenshot of it somewhere. I'll have to find that. But that was one where my mobile device, which does not have anything wrong with it, had this app that was presenting me with a particular message on the screen. I have to find that. It was really good, too. I had to capture it. I need to obfuscate all of the phone numbers and things out of it, however, to make that happen. Okay. Well, with that, I think we're pretty much close to the top of the hour. Let's go to our keynote. Let's find a green light on the keynote. Can we get a green light? Can I get it? Yes, I did. Turn that down just a little bit. Get the play button going there. Everybody is online with us. This is working. That is working. Is it going to work, though? There it goes. Took a little bit of a second now, didn't it? Let's do a live stream, everybody. All I have to do is figure out what buttons to push on my side, and we should be able to get started. And here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2025 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I bring you questions that are directly related to the official CompTIA exam objectives, and we get to see how well you might know some of this content. And if you are here on our live stream, you can participate interactively and answer the questions as we go along, and everybody else who is here will answer along with you. Thank you so much for being here. We do one of these study groups every month. There's always something interesting going on whenever we start looking at study groups. If you are here live, though, I would love for you to join us. The way that you would do that is to pop open a new browser window and head over to the URL that you see right there on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. This will not only be the link that we use to answer all of the questions today, this will also be the link that you can use to submit questions for the second hour. We call this second hour our after show. So if you would like to send me a question about anything you would like, it can be about technology or IT or about the holidays. I don't know. It could be anything you would like. So feel free to be able to do that. Now, if you are on that link, if you are here live, then you can participate and interactively answer these questions. If you're watching this on the replay, that's fine too. You can still follow along, but that particular URL will not be available to you. There is a question that I have waiting for you that we refer to as our rewind question. We refer to it that way because it's a question that I gave you last month. It's our only question that's a replay-ish kind of question on the study group so that we're able to see that you're able to get in and answer the questions properly. Our standing rule in these questions is to answer the questions online using that link. So please don't put any answers in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. Our rewind question of the day is a company's security policies have been updated to require SAE. Which of these would need to follow this new policy? Would it be MDM, email server, VPN concentrator, DLP, or access points? If you think you know the answer, you can submit your answer at any time using that link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. And as I've mentioned, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. We're going to come back to that answer in just a moment. In the meantime, I want to thank you so much for being here. Of course, we are not doing a live stream. You can watch our entire Security Plus training course. It's available on our website and our YouTube channel for free. You don't have to register. You don't have to sign up. There's nothing additional to pay for. Nothing's hidden behind a paywall. I'm not giving you some of the content and hoping that you somehow find a way to get the rest of the content. Everything's there. Makes it so easy to study for exactly the topics that you should expect to find on the official CompTIA exam. And you can find A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus all located there. Also, don't forget about our connections on social media on professormesser.com/YouTube/Instagram/LinkedIn /Discord/Twitter and all of the others. If you'd like to find us on there, it's very easy. You simply put professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to find us on. Very easy way to do that. Hopefully, if you'll find us there. And if we're not on your favorite social media site, let me know. Maybe we should get an account going there as well. We are going today to talk about Security Plus. The existing, current, and most up-to-date Security Plus exam is known as the SY0-701. Those are the exam versions that you should be looking for, and all of your exam materials should also be associated with that. This is an exam that was released on November the 7th of 2023, and we think the estimated retirement will be somewhere around May of 2027. So as we sit here in 2025, we have plenty of time before we ever have to worry about this version of the exam going away. So that's a nice thing to have to think about when we're planning and scheduling all of our studies and planning and scheduling our exam. We need to make sure that we are studying for the right exam and that we're able to register for that correct exam. And the way that you would do that is to make sure everything is marked as SY0-701. It's a single exam that you need to pass. This exam takes place over a 90-minute time frame, and you get a maximum of 90 questions, which means you could get fewer than 90 questions on your exam. The passing score we're hoping for is on a scale from 100 to 900, and the passing score you would like to have is a 750. Of course, the actual grading process is one that CompTIA does not share with us, so you just have to do the best you can on your exam, and hopefully when you hit that finish button, the score of 750 pops up on your screen or better. The exam itself consists of different kinds of questions. You will have many multiple choice-based questions. We just had a multiple choice question that we were looking at there. There are also performance-based questions that you can answer. The performance-based questions are available on all of our live study groups, and we will do a performance-based question here as well today. Also let you know that on our website, we have other study materials that might help you. If you're watching our videos and you'd like some notes to follow as you're going through, our course notes are available on our site, along with our practice exams, downloadable versions of the videos, the video content in MP3 audio format, our exam hacks ebook, and so much more. It's available on our website at professormesser.com/701SB for our Success Bundle, or simply choose the Security Plus menu at the top of the screen. We also have a replay available of this live stream immediately after we're done. You'll see that on our YouTube channel. But I also create an audio-only podcast version. You can see that at professormesser.com/podcast. which means if you have a podcast listening program and you would like to add us, the RSS that you need is on that particular page. If you use a streaming media service like Spotify or some of the others, you can simply search for Professor Messer on those resources, say on Spotify, and you'll see all of our podcasts will pop up there, so you don't even have to download anything. It's right there on your Spotify screen. You'll be able to step through all of those podcasts whenever you would like. I also have a YouTube video description on this. Will, in about 24 hours, have timestamps associated with it, so you can find exactly the right information you're looking for and the right times in those timestamps. Might be something that you can use. And when we're not doing one of these live streams, we are available on our Discord. We have a lot going on there. And by the way, if you are someone who is looking at those timestamps on our YouTube video descriptions, it's our marketing manager, Lori, who steps through all of those. She's watching this on the replay and putting all of those timestamps in for us. Thank you, Lori. We could not do that part without you. And it's so valuable to be able to find that information as quickly as possible. Hopefully something that you can think of as well. Head over to our Discord when we're done. That's where we usually will hang out. Eventually, we expect you will need to take your exam, and that exam, of course, is something that you need to pay for. You have to purchase your exam to take it. You could go to the CompTIA website and pay full price, but if you go to professormesser.com/vouchers and you happen to be in the US or Canada, you'll find discounted vouchers. It's the same voucher you can get over on the CompTIA website, except it costs less, and who doesn't want that? Not only does it cost less, I will give you more than what you would get on the CompTIA website, because every person who purchases a voucher on my site gets a free copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that I created with a series of tips and tricks of things that I have accumulated through the years of taking these CompTIA exams, things that can help you with the study process. I even give you some strategies you can use during the exam itself to perhaps get you a few extra points, and who doesn't need extra points on their certification exam. This is something available for free. In fact, you can't purchase it. It's only available if you purchase a voucher or you purchase one of my existing success bundles. Find out more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go back to that question I asked you earlier. And the question was, a company's security policies have been updated to require SAE. Which of these would need to follow this new policy? Would it be MDM, email server, VPN concentrator, DLP, or access points? Let's close our poll and see what you chose in this connection. 59% of you, a pretty strong showing, say the answer is access points. We do have some answers that were double digits. 17% says MDM, 13% says email server. Then we're down to single digits. DLP came in at 7%. And 4% of you said VPN concentrator. Whenever you see SAE, you should automatically be thinking in your mind, this must have something to do with wireless encryption, because this is a new addition to the WPA3 standard. SAE is a way that you can have a better authentication between systems without having to send any type of hash or any other details across the network. This is referred to as a simultaneous authentication of equals. That's what SAE stands for. It's a fancy way of doing a key exchange that's very similar to the way that Diffie-Hellman works, where you can have a public key and a private key, combine those together on both sides, and create a shared session key that is unique to those two devices without having to send that session key across the network. SAE, you might also hear this referred to as the Dragonfly handshake. Not sure why it's called the Dragonfly handshake. Has a cool name, but that is something that is related to this IEEE standard associated with the simultaneous authentication of equals, which means that this is a wireless feature. And if you were to look at our different options here, the only option that has anything to do with wireless is indeed the one that says access points. That's where we would enable SAE. MDMs are useful for managing policies on a workstation, but aren't necessarily related to wireless networks. Email servers are certainly focused on emails, but SAE doesn't have to do with emails. That's not how that part works. We have DLP, which is data loss prevention. These are tools and systems that are designed to look for sensitive information and block those from being transmitted through the network. But DLP is not necessarily associated with wireless networks and isn't technically involved in the SAE process. And then VPN concentrators, although that is an authentication, it's not related to wireless connectivity, so that's also not related to SAE. If we wanted to find the best answer here, really the only answer that has anything to do with SAE would indeed be access points. 59% of you got that one right. I want to say that's a little bit better than we did last month, so congratulations and well done on that one. Maybe some of you remember some of the things we talked about last month and that SAE is stuck with you. Maybe we'll have some similar experiences today as we go through additional topics. Speaking of additional topics, it's time for some new questions. And of course, our first new question of each study group is a performance-based question. Performance-based questions are questions that CompTIA considers anything but multiple choice. So that opens the door to many different kinds of questions. It could be a fill in the blank. It could put you at a command prompt that might put things on your screen in a particular order. Maybe you have to drag and drop things on the screen. There are a lot of different ways to ask a question. So there are infinite ways to ask a question. And so performance-based questions could be any infinite number of methods to ask you for details. Now, fortunately, the performance-based questions are only asking you questions that come from the CompTIA exam objectives. So one of the things I often will tell people is that if you know the content, if you know the bullets on the exam objectives, it really doesn't matter how they ask the question. You will be able to answer it with no problem. And hopefully you'll get a feel for that today, because I have for you a performance-based question that it's kind of a drag and drop, kind of a fill-in-the-blankish drag and drop question, but you definitely know what the possible answers are. You just have to pick the right answers. Our performance-based question of the month asks, data at rest, data in transit, or data in use? And I have for you 6 scenarios, and I want you to tell me for each one of these scenarios, what is this possible question? So you should be able to fill in all 6 of those as you were looking through these questions. For those of you listening in on the podcast side, let's step through each one of these so you can see what they are. The first question is, all company tape backups are located in an offsite storage facility. Is that data at rest, data in transit, or data in use? The next one is, a login process verifies both a password and a smart card certificate. The next one is, all traffic sent between 2 remote sites uses an IPsec VPN tunnel. The next one on our list is, a user's video conference is experiencing high jitter rates. We have all of the data on a USB drive is encrypted with FDE. And the last one is, all data sent to the SAN VLAN uses jumbo frames. For each one of those, I want you to tell me whether this is data at rest, data in transit, or data in use. And if you think you know the answers, you'd like to submit those, you can do it using the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answers. A number of you are already putting in answers. In fact, I'm going to sneak a peek at some of these. A lot of you are putting in one answer for all of these. I guess that's the way I've set it up, isn't it? Didn't really give you a very good way to do it, but that's okay. We will step through these individually. You will know exactly where you will be able to put these in this list. Should be good. Of course, each one of these is a different one of these particular answers. So you've got 6 potential scenarios here. For each one of these, you will be deciding whether each one is data at rest, data in transit, or data in use. They might all be, well, not all going to be different, but they could all be different from each other. We'll put it that way. I think you've figured that one out at this point. We have a smattering of different ones. We will figure out what those answers are. Yes, don't worry about the answer limit. We aren't able to compile the answers anyway, but it might be good for you to put your own notes in there as you are submitting those. We can certainly talk about that as we get through this question. Performance-based questions don't necessarily have to be a fill in the blank, or in this case, sort of a drag and drop. You can also have questions that might present information on the screen that you need to interpret. Maybe there are particular things that should go in a particular order. You might have to rearrange those on the screen. They can ask any kind of question they would like. And they often change the type of questions they ask. So you can't really study, or at least I don't think you should study how they ask the question. You should instead study the information that is in the questions, and you will be able to make that happen. So hopefully you'll have a familiarity with that as you go through all of the details. I really like, as you are going through and putting the answers in, that you're really thinking about them as you're going each one of them through this list. It might be something useful to be able to have there. So now that you've submitted these, let's go through each one of these and see if we can figure out what these differences are between these different scenarios and whether they are data at rest, data in transit, or data in use. We can certainly do that. So let's start with the very first one, which is all company tape backups are located in an off-site storage facility. The important part of knowing whether something's data at rest, data in transit, or data in use is because we will use different security controls depending on what the state of that data happens to be. And when you have data that's located, you've made these backups are stored at an off-site storage facility. They might be on tape. They might be on a storage drive. They might be on a USB drive. Hopefully not. But you can, of course, store them on any type of media. And because that data is not being accessed by a CPU at that very moment, so we know it's not data in use, we also know that it's not data that is currently moving anywhere. It's not going back and forth. So that's another one. We have data. It's not data in transit. Therefore, for that particular answer, one that is a tape backup that's just sitting there, then it is data at rest. It means it's stored on a storage device, and there it sits. Data at rest was the answer that we were looking for. We also, let's go to the next one on our list, which is a login process verifies both a password and a smart card certificate. This is not an unusual way to authenticate. You might add a username, a password. We've got other options within a login that we might use. Maybe there is a pseudo random code that we have to put in. Maybe there is biometrics that we have to use. Those different authentication factors are important to know. And in this case, we are using different authentication factors. We're using a password, which is something we know, and we're using a smart card certificate, which is something we have. So those are two different authentication factors. Because we are actively logging in, it is evaluating our password. It is evaluating the certificate that we're connecting to the system. It's being used whenever we get into this computer. It's actively in the memory. It's actively going into the CPU, which means that this type of data would be data in use. Obviously, we can't do anything with how we use the data unless it is in memory and the CPU is analyzing that data. Next on our list is all traffic sent between two remote sites uses an IPsec VPN tunnel. That will certainly keep our data safe. The data is not at rest because it's not sitting at one site or the other. It's moving from one site to the other, and it's not in use. We are not doing anything with that data at the moment. So that's not something that would be a problem. So the real problem there is the data's in motion, as we say. And data in motion, you might also see that referred to as data in transit. We often use those two terms simultaneously, and they are interchangeable. We can obviously do that. Data in transit is the same thing as data in motion. On the exam objectives, they refer to it as in transit. So I would expect on the exam, you would also see the same terminology. Next on our list is a user's video conference is experiencing high jitter rates. Well, that's not good. That's not something that makes it go well for the people who are on the video conference, because high jitter rates means that the traffic is coming in at very wide, very large inter-packet delays. And the larger those delays, the more choppy a live conversation and a live video tends to be. So when we get into that scenario, users video conference experiencing high jitter rates, that's something happening right now and what we are doing with it. So that would be data in transit. This is the data going back and forth across the network. Jitter rates are referring to how quickly the data is going back and forth. It is not talking about how the data is being used. It's simply giving us a statistic about how long each packet is taking to get to us. And we would like a consistent rate coming through the network. Next on our list is all of the data on a USB drive is encrypted with FDE. And for those of you already familiar with your encryption and with your acronyms, then you know that that is full disk encryption. If you have BitLocker or some other similar type of encryption on your system, you are using full disk encryption. There's also a full disk encryption on Windows. The BitLocker to go can be used for USB drives as well. When you have information that is stored on a device, then it is going to be at rest. So data at rest on a USB drive, the same way that data was at rest when it was on our tape backup system. Lastly, we have all data sent to the SAN VLAN uses jumbo frames. Jumbo frames, of course, are frames that we can make very large, which are very useful when you're transferring large amounts of data. You can send fewer frames across the network, which means there's less overhead and a more efficient use of the bandwidth. All data sent to a SAN VLAN using jumbo frames describes the data as it's moving through the network. So this would be data in use. And that is the 6 different states of data that we were looking for in this performance-based question. We have a company tape backup being stored in an offsite storage facility is data at rest. A login process verifying both a password and a smart card certificate is data in use. All traffic sent between 2 remote sites uses an IPsec VPN tunnel. That will be data in transit. A user's video conference experiencing high jitter rates would also be data in transit. All of the data on a USB drive encrypted with full disk encryption is data at rest. And all data sent to the SAN VLAN uses jumbo frames. That would also be data in use. Well, it wouldn't be data in transit, wouldn't it? Why did I put in use there? We're sending data, jumbo frames. That I say that's in transit, people. We're making that. So that's everybody's saying, what? It's not in transit? Watch what happens. Watch what happens here. Here we go. Transit. This is how you know it's a live stream right there. We just did it in real time, everybody. See, now you didn't miss all of them. Now you got them all right. That worked out okay, didn't it? Well, I'm pretty flexible with all of those. We can figure out the details. Now we all did so much better. The chat room is so happy with me now. They were very not happy with me a moment ago, which is why we can make those changes on the fly and make that happen. Trust me, that is not the first mistake we have made on a live stream. This will also not be the last mistake we make on a live stream. But together, you folks are so smart. You will tell me when we mess up, and we can always correct it here. So we're all good with this one. Now the question becomes, what if you did 6 of these and then you got 5 of them right? Maybe you didn't get all of them correct. Do you get partial credit? Do you? Well, CompTIA has told us on their website, they have a frequently asked questions filed a series of questions they have on their website helpline there, and they talk about what you need to know about grading on performance-based questions. The question is, do you get partial credit on these performance-based questions? And their answer is sometimes yes, but sometimes no. It's really a non-answer on their website. It doesn't help very much there either. That scenario is one where if you are someone who is worrying to that level, that detail about the grading of your exam, you might be focusing your efforts in the wrong place. There is no way that you can, of course, know how they grade the exam, and they're not ever going to tell you. So my recommendation to you is don't worry how they're grading. You should instead work on doing as well as you can with every question, because ultimately you can't reverse engineer how they graded the exam anyway. So don't worry. There are things you should be worrying about with this exam. How they grade it is not one of those things. So don't worry about it. Just keep moving in that same direction and being able to work through this. So there we go. The data itself is one that we need to know. There is an entire video on the data and the states of that data. Make sure you go through that video, and that might provide you with more insight into how we come up with whether data is at rest, in transit, or in use. Let's shift gears now back to our multiple choice questions. This next question I have for you is this one that asks, which of the following would be the most efficient way to apply user permissions on large-scale network implementations? Would it be single sign-on protocol, client certificates, authorization model, multi-factor authentication, or onboarding automation? There's a lot to deal with there. We have, which of the following would be the most efficient way to apply user permissions on large-scale network implementations? Is it single sign-on protocol, client certificates, authorization model, multi-factor authentication, or onboarding automation? If you think you know the answer, submit your answer at any time by going to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link on your screen to submit what you believe the answer is. Oh, why is jitter rate not in use? Jitter rate describes a statistic of information as it's passing through the network, as it is transiting through the network. And the data does not get buffered on a live event. When you're on a live stream with someone, you can't buffer what I say now and maybe present it to them 30 seconds from now. That's not going to work for you. So that's one of those situations where you really do need to be more familiar with the real-time aspect of that. Now, if it's something like on YouTube where it's all recorded and it's not a live event, well, that's a little different. We can wait while things get buffered. You know, you're waiting there as the wheel is spinning for 30 seconds or so, and then you can get to that point. But if you're somebody who is on a live conversation, once you lose that data, you can't somehow rewind your live conversation. You just have to keep talking. And somebody will say, oh, I missed that part. What'd you say again? And they have to repeat themselves. That's the problem we have with that. And that's why you can't buffer it, because the moment's already gone. You just missed it. So that's another thing to think about. Another great way to focus on what we need to know. This question a little bit different though. This question talking about user permissions. If you're on a network of 10 people, maybe user permissions isn't your biggest problem. But when you get to medium to large scale networks, how do you keep all of this data safe and secure and give people the permissions that are correct? That is another one that we need to consider. So this question really speaks to that. The question again asks, which of the following would be the most efficient way to apply user permissions on a large-scale network implementation? Would it be through a single sign-on protocol, client certificates, authorization models, multi-factor authentication, or onboarding automation? This is really a question that talks about how we focus on giving people the rights to data that they need and the right kind of permissions to that data as well. What did you answer with this one? Let's close our poll and find out. We can see that we don't know. We got rainbows here. 35% of you, if we go with the plurality of you, you would think an authorization model is one that would be an efficient way to apply user permissions. 26% though say onboarding automation would be an efficient way to apply user permissions. 18% said a single sign-on protocol. 12% say client certificates. And only one single digit, which is just barely, with 9%, maybe it was 9.9. Can we round it up? It's close enough. Multi-factor authentication at 9% of the answer. Authorizations, implementing this in efficient ways, making these things happen can be a challenge. What if you had no type of structure for applying any type of permissions or authorizations to data? So somebody works in the shipping and receiving department. It's a single person, and we say that that single person can create a shipping label, they can track a shipment, and they can view monthly shipment reports. But there may be more than one person that works in the shipping and receiving department. So there might be 9 people that are doing this shipping, and we're hiring more and more people. So for each one of those people, we would give each one of them individual rights to create a shipping label, track a shipment, view monthly shipping reports. We hire a new person. Oh, we're going to have to also apply all 3 of those. What if it's more than 3? What if there are 12 different rights and permissions that each person needs? What if there are 50 different rights and permissions that each person needs? Because we're just talking about shipping and receiving. What about their email access? What about their internet access? What about access to the intranet? What about access to a special payroll-based application that they need to use? We'll just keep adding and adding, and every single person, you would need to add 50 different rights and permissions. This does not scale very well. This goes a little bit crazy when you start getting to that point. So one of the ways that we get around that problem, one of the ways that we create scalability, one of the ways that we create additional security is by having an authorization model for this. This effectively puts kind of a middleman in this, and we refer to this as more of an abstraction layer. That's the term you will often find for something like that. This abstraction layer means that we can create more of a relationship between who the user is and then let all of the other rights and permissions figure themselves out from there. For example, instead of applying 50 different rights and permissions for every single person we hire for the shipping and receiving department, we simply say, oh, that person is member of shipping and receiving. That's it. You give them one single definition of who they are and what they are doing. Oh, they're in shipping and receiving, therefore they get the rights and permissions associated with everybody associated with shipping and receiving, which might include creating a shipping label, tracking a shipment, view monthly shipment reports, and so on. Even better, what if we needed to change one of those? What if suddenly we have decided the 100 people in shipping and receiving, we have 100 people working here now, we need to change this so that none of them can track a shipment. Well, then I would have to go into 100 accounts and manually delete the permission that says track a shipment. Or we simply go to the shipping and receiving object in our operating system and we change that permission, and it applies to everybody already associated with shipping and receiving. So this is the beauty of this, that whenever you are working through authorizations of what's on the network, you need to make this much more scalable, which means we could have 100 people in shipping and receiving. We have 1,000 people in shipping and receiving. And if we need to change any of those permissions, we change it in one place rather than changing it in 1,000 places, which is why an authorization model, the 35% of you that chose that answer, that's what we were looking for. That is the value. That is the power of an authorization model, regardless of what authorization model you plan to use. Authorization model really is the most way to provide efficiency to this. Now, there are different ways to implement these types of user permissions, but that wasn't the question. The question was efficiency and how we could apply those on a large scale network implementation. So 26% of you, for example, said onboarding automation, which I guess would help during the very first day that they're on the job. Although this onboarding automation, if they needed 50 different permissions, that onboarding would have to add 50 different one of those. And if those ever change, you would have to go and change those scripts. Or the onboarding automation could just add them to the shipping and receiving department, and then you're done. But then what happens after they get onboarded? What happens a week later when management decides we need to add more additional capabilities to what these folks in shipping and receiving are doing? Everybody should have rights to purchase additional shipping materials. Okay, we'll add those rights and permissions to all 1,000 users in the shipping and receiving department. That's not going to help. Your onboarding automation already happened. So onboarding automation isn't going to help you very much when you need to make those changes, especially when you're making changes constantly in these large environments. So that's not going to help you after your first day. We also have 18% of you that said single sign-on protocol, which is great for applying a single sign-on process for having a single username and password that gives you access to whatever resources you want. But the way that you log in, the username, the password, the authentication factors have nothing to do with what access you have once you log in. It makes the login process easier, but has nothing to do with authentication. It has nothing to do with authorization once you have authenticated. Let's get those right. You're authenticating during the single sign-on process, which then provides you with authorizations to data once you have proven that you are who you really are. Those are two different things. So we need to make sure we keep them separate. Single sign-on protocol is not going to help you with user permissions, especially in a large-scale network implementation. We have 12% that said client certificates. Similar problem there. Client certificates are used most often for authentication, doing it myself now, proving that you are who you say you are, or proving that you are using a piece of equipment that is authorized by the company. Once they prove that you are who you say you are and prove that you are using a trusted device that has a client certificate, then we can apply the permissions for each individual user. We then have 9% as our last answer of multi-factor authentication. And as we've already mentioned, the authentication process is different than the authorization process. So multi-factor authentication is not going to help you at all with how you decide what type of access and permission someone might have. So there is what we were looking for, is those particular questions. Hopefully, those would be the things that you would be familiar with if you were trying to apply user permissions across a large scale. And authorization models are perfect for doing something like that. Another one of those that you might want to study up on if you want more information on those, as you probably saw earlier, they are in my video section 1.2, and the name of the video is aptly named Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting. That is exactly what you could choose for that. Let's do another question, shall we? Let's keep going through this list. Next on our list is the question that asks, a company would like user workstations and laptops to identify known and unknown vulnerabilities. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be CRL, HIPS, NDA, PKI, or HSM? It's an acronym question, everybody. You probably saw that already, though. The question again asks, a company would like user workstations and laptops to identify known and unknown vulnerabilities. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be CRL, HIPS, NDA, PKI, or HSM? If you think you know the answer, please no answers in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you know what those happen to be. Hopefully, you're familiar with this process and what you would use to be able to make that happen. This is a question that many of these topics are similar to each other, but all of these acronyms are in your acronym list. So we have to figure out what these acronyms are referring to and then apply those to the technology. This is also, by the way, a very common tactic for the exam, is they don't tend to ask you what these letters stand for. In fact, you can see on this question, there was no request of tell me what CRL stands for, tell me what HIPS stands for, tell me what NDA stands for, what does PKI or HSM stand for? We don't ask those questions. And CompTIA doesn't tend to ask those questions on their exam either. Instead, you need to understand what those are referring to, how they are implemented in the bigger scheme, the bigger picture of technology as we're putting it on our network, and then applying how that relates to the question that is posed for us. So another one of those things that we should consider as we are going through our system, becoming a lot more familiar with the acronyms. There's a big acronym list in the back of the exam objectives, for example, that would be a great place to go to find out more about those objectives. Let's now have a look at what we believe the answer is. A number of you have gotten your answers locked in. The question again asks, a company would like user workstations and laptops to identify known and unknown vulnerabilities. Which of the following would be the best choice for this task? Would it be CRL, HIPS, NDA, PKI, or HSM? I'm looking for big numbers on this one. We got big numbers. 63% of you say the answer is HIPS. That does not lie. We have 14% of you that said CRL, 13% of you that said HSM, 9% that said PKI, and only 1% said NDA. HIPS is what we would use to find an intrusion. Specifically, this is a host-based intrusion prevention system. That's what the HIPS stand for. This is something that can identify attacks that are known. Many intrusion prevention systems can also identify unknown attacks using a number of different criteria, but it can identify times when we may not exactly have seen this attack before, but we've seen attacks like it, and we should block it as it's coming through. That is something that can be pretty useful. We can use signatures for this. We can use heuristics. There might be behavioral analysis, and we can identify a number of different types of attacks. Anything that's going across the network that is identifiable. So a buffer overflow, a SQL injection, somebody modifying a registry, maybe a particular executable that we're familiar with as being malicious. All of that information can be identified using a host-based intrusion prevention system. That is what we were looking for. This answer was a HIPS. That's exactly, and 63% of you thought that as well. You were spot on with that one. We did have larger numbers here, kind of a tie for second place between CRL. The certificate revocation list is commonly used to verify that a device certificate or an application certificate is one that is still valid. That has nothing to do with identifying known or unknown vulnerabilities. We have 13% that said HSM, hardware security module, very commonly used to be able to provide additional protection for individual devices and for other web-based certificates or other certificates that might be in a data center. But an HSM does not identify known or unknown vulnerabilities. That doesn't help you at all. That's more for protecting the certificates that you already have. We have 9% that said a PKI, public key infrastructure, which is a good one because a public key infrastructure is one that is, of course, used to manage the public and private keys that are used for many different processes. In fact, sometimes multiple keys for individual users, something that can be very, very useful to have. PKIs are certainly available for that. And then NDA, non-disclosure agreements, have nothing to do with identifying known or unknown vulnerabilities. And NDA, only 1% of you chose that one. That obviously would not be the right answer. For all of this list, a company using a way to identify known and unknown vulnerabilities, only one thing in this list really qualifies for that. It would be a host-based intrusion prevention system. That is something that can very easily help you find those vulnerabilities. And then you have the choice of what you'd like to do with it. If the intrusion prevention system has identified a vulnerability, do we allow it through an alert on it? Do we block it at the intrusion prevention? You've got a lot of options there because it is an IPS. You can decide exactly how you would like to handle the disposition of that potential issue. HIPS was the answer we were looking for. 63% of you got absolutely right. Well done with that. Before we get to the next question, I do want to remind you that the Security Plus exam, as we've already seen, has a number of different topics, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different topics on the exam. And if you were to watch every single video that I have, it's 121 videos to be able to step through all of them. It's a course that involves over 15 hours of content, quite a bit that is there. And that's because our exam covers so many different topics. We've already talked about encryption. We've talked about being able to authenticate and authorize people that are connecting to the network. There's risk management questions. There's questions about details of security challenges. So there's a lot that you need to know. You might go through all these videos and think, well, what did I think? What did we watch in that first video? What was that? I'm already 121 videos into this, but what about the first video I watched? Well, if we had a set of notes that we could reference, like the ones that you see here, these are my SY0-701 course notes. We have tons of information that we can work through for this. Our course notes provide us with every single thing that you might need to know, all of the text from all of my videos, all of the important charts, all of the important graphics, everything that kind of summarizes the process. For example, authorization models. There's one that we just looked at. So here's the authorization model information that's within my course notes. 96 pages of these course notes. It goes on and on and on because the exam seems at times to go on and on and on. You can get this in a digital form that you just saw or a physical form that I am Vanna Whiting for you right here in the front. You can see that it's exactly the same information we were just looking at, but it's in a format that is printed out that you could take as a book anywhere you go. Obviously, full color, perfect bound, like a softback book might be. Those are my course notes, and we also have options to combine these with my practice exams and maybe even give you a little bit more of a discount. So another thing that you could work through if you're working on all of those, that might be very, very useful to have my Security Plus course notes, something that you can work through. This is not available in a hardcover. No, it's all just a softback. We do not have hardcovers for a 96-page set of course notes, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Something we might want to wrap in leather and put on the shelf that we'll hand down to our children. No, I don't think anybody's doing that. I think you're using it for this exam and you're done. If you want to know more about my course notes, go to the website, professormesser.com/701cn, or use the links at the top of the page. Let's have more questions here. Let's go through more. This next question asks, a technician is troubleshooting a problem with EAP. Which of the following would be most associated with this issue? Is it encryption strength for VPN connections? Is it secure storage of backup data? Is it authorized email server IP addresses? Is it authentication to the wireless network? Or is it recovery from a backup image? One of those will be the answer that we were looking for. If you think you know the answer, you can answer at any time by submitting your question at the link you see on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock that in. Certainly something we need to think of as we are working through all of these. Hopefully you are familiar with EAP, with EAP. Sometimes you'll hear it referred to that. Having a problem? Are you having a problem with EAP? Well, then you should have a look at this issue. Maybe you could choose the one that you think it is. Lock in your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA and tell me what you think the right answer might be. Have a look at those. Let's see how you did. A number of you have already submitted this answer. The question again asks, a technician is troubleshooting a problem with EAP. Which of the following would be most associated with this issue? Is it encryption strength for VPN connections? Is it secure storage of backup data? Is it unauthorized email server IP addresses? Is it authentication to the wireless network? Or is it recovery from a backup image? What did you choose? I'm glad you asked, because we're going to close our poll and see what the options are. Big numbers on this one. Is this the biggest one we've gotten so far? 76% of you said that the answer is authentication to the wireless network. 15% say it's encryption strength for VPN connections, and then it drops very quickly into single digits. 7% say it's unauthorized email server IP addresses, and a tie for last place with 1% apiece between secure storage of backup data and recovery from a backup image. One of the useful things on this one is knowing the terms associated with this acronym, or as they put in the exam objective, the spelled out name for EAP is the Extensible Authentication Protocol. The EAP, it's a framework that developers use to be able to provide authentication over the network. There obviously needs to be some way to standardize how we are doing this authentication. And there are a number of different ways to do this using this very flexible authentication framework. EAP is one that there are a number of different methods for EAP. One of the most common ones that we've seen on a network, and you've probably even seen this in the configuration of your network adapter, is you can integrate or enable 802.1x. That X is not an abbreviation or a placeholder. That X is the actual name of the standard. So 802.1 with an X next to it. The one after this would be 802.1y. The one after that's 802.1z, just so you're familiar with their nomenclature and how they number things and name things. So 802.1x is a way that you can authenticate to a network or require authentication to the network and prevent somebody from simply plugging into any interface that could be in a conference room, prevent people from plugging into an Ethernet connection in the conference room and gaining access to the network. That's what keeps me off your network if you invite me into a meeting, because I'm going to plug into that Ethernet connection. And unless I have the proper authentication, I'm not going to be able to go anywhere on your network. That's a pretty nice security feature to have. So 802.1x is what we are referring to it with that. And you'll often hear this referred to as a network access control method, or NAC. So you will often hear those terms used almost simultaneously. EAP, NAC, 802.1x. They're a similar family to each other, and you should absolutely know what the differences are between all of those. There's subtle differences as you're working through them. So this is the one that most of you have worked through. And in fact, if you're authenticating to the network, you're providing your username and your password to gain access using EAP, then it will be authenticating, in this case, to the wireless network. 802.1x, of course, can authenticate to wired networks as well, but the answer that I provided to you is one associated with wireless networks, and that is the answer we were looking for, and that is the 76% of you that got that one absolutely right. EAP is not associated with the encryption strength over a VPN connection. That is specific to the type of encryption that you are configuring for that VPN connection, and it's not associated with EAP. 7% of you said unauthorized email server IP addresses. There are a number of DNS records associated with using server IPs. Specifically, the DNS record for SPF is associated with authorized and unauthorized server IP addresses. And then we have 1% for secure storage of backup data, which is not how EAP manages or is associated with any type of security. And then recovery from a backup image, similar scenario. This is relating to the backups and the data that we have there. And also not associated with EAP. Those would be separate parameters that are outside the scope of being able to authenticate using a standardized framework. So for this question, troubleshooting a problem with the EAP, what would be most associated with this issue would be the one that 76% of you chose, authentication to the wireless network. And you got that one absolutely right. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that authorizes that you are here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That's a continuing education unit, as if we didn't have enough acronyms today. We'll add that one onto the top. Your CEUs. This would be those of you that are watching this that have already earned your certification and you're looking at different ways to renew your certification every 3 years. You can use these CEUs as one of the many methods available to you to provide that renewal. The way that you can earn that email from me is you must follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put November 2025 Security Plus. And then in the body of the message on the line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, EAP troubleshooting. EAP troubleshooting are the super secret code words of the month. Once you have submitted those, it usually takes me about a week to turn these around. So you'll receive an email from me that has been digitally signed that certifies that you are here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU, continuing education unit. Again, that process is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, you click the Contact Us link. In that email or in that form that comes up, you put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put November 2025 Security Plus. And in the body of the message on the line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, EAP troubleshooting. I think I got that one right. right? EAP troubleshooting. That's where we would go for that one. Again, it takes me about a week to turn these around to you, but I'm more than happy to send them. You just need to submit those, and you can do that either by watching this live, or you can also submit these if you were watching this on a replay. Let's do another question. We do have some time before we hit the top of the hour, so let's get another one in or two. I have a couple of questions we could probably step through. This next question asks, a security administrator would like to publicly identify the organization's authorized email servers for their domain. Which of the following would be the best way to provide this information? Would it be through DMARC, AUP, SPF, NDA, or SMTPS? Got a few there so to work through. And almost all of these, again, not only is this an acronym question, but many of these acronyms are related to each other, which makes this a little more complicated. We'll have to see what you are working through as you're breaking all of these down. Again, the question asks, a security administrator would like to publicly identify the organization's authorized email servers for their domain. Which of the following would be the best way to provide this information? Is that through DMARC, AUP, SPF, NDA, or SMTPS? This might be a good one to step through. We know this. So folks in the chat room were asking if a CEU is the same thing as a CPE. I don't know. You got me. CompTIA uses the term CEU, Continuing Education Unit. These generally are very similar to other types of continuing education packages or proofs that you can provide. That's what you would use for this one, is knowing what that particular continuing education feature might be for you. And many places might use those and use different terms to describe those. It's effectively the same thing if you're ever working through those. And many organizations use similar terms. They might use CP, they might use CEU, they might use CUU, they might use CEE. I've seen it written many different ways because everybody has a different set of acronyms that they would like to use, not be confused with anyone else. I guess that's something you can think about, breaking those down. And many organizations will use this as proof that you worked on something from a third party. So this may not even be for renewal or for continuing education. It might be for proof that you were actually here and watching this. So a lot of different ways that people use that process of sending it in. Let's do the answer to this question. Let's see how you did. The question again asks, a security administrator would like to publicly identify the organization's authorized email servers for their domain. Which of the following would be the best way to provide this information? Is it through DMARC, AUP, SPF, NDA, or SMTPS? And as I mentioned, of course, all of these, most of these tend to be related with each other, but what answer did you give? Let's close our poll and find out. The answer that you submitted, we got a bit of a rainbow. So 41% of you say the answer is DMARC, 32% of you that say the answer is SPF, 21% of you say the answer is SMTPS, and then it drops to single digits immediately, AUP at 4% and NDA at 2%. As you can already tell, the three technologies that tend to be related in this question are indeed DMARC, SPF, and SMTPS. All three of those are email related. AUP is not technically an email technology. Having a way to have users that will understand the proper use of technology in your network is something that can help you quite a bit. And having that documented as a set of policies is associated with an AUP. It's not directly related with email. And if you're ever needing after the fact to help understand if somebody used technology in the right way, you will definitely refer to your user AUP. It's probably in your user books, your user account information that you have in your environment. NDA, non-disclosure agreement, is for either one or more people in an agreement to decide that they're not going to talk about what they have put inside of this particular agreement. So it's a great way to make sure that if somebody's looking at private information, that they don't walk out of the room and tell everybody else what they just saw. You are in a situation where you cannot disclose anything. It is a non-disclosure, and it is agreement that you've made with someone else. NDA, again, not an email-related term. We do have 21% that say the answer is SMTPS, the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. Secure is a very common way to move emails between devices, but has nothing to do with identifying what email servers might be authorized and which email servers might not be authorized. It's simply the protocol used to send email from one place to the other. We also have DMARC. DMARC is a way to define a policy in your DNS that tells everyone else, if you find an email that says it's from us, but it really didn't come from us, what do you do with it? And we get to tell these people what we'd like you to do with it. We would like you to delete it, and they will delete it. We would like you to send it to your spam folder. They will send it to the spam folder. So you get to decide how these things work and how they break through. So maybe that's something you can think about as you're managing your email service. There is another DNS record that provides even more detail. How do you know that it really came from an authorized email server? Well, you would define a list of all of your authorized email servers as part of your Sender Policy Framework record, SPF. Sender Policy Framework is a record that you put in your DNS that defines all of the authorized servers for your system. This only has one of my servers in it. Mailgun.org is one that I use to send my emails out to you. So in my DNS, I have told everybody, if you receive an email from me and it came from a server at mailgun.org, that's legitimate. That's one of the many ways that we're able to have less spam on the internet and be able to tie back the emails that we're receiving to a very specific set of authorized servers. Another good way to do that. So SPF, great way to do that. Now, if SPF failed, if suddenly somebody realized, well, I've got an email that says it's from you, but I looked at your DNS and the email server it came from was not mailgun.org, well, that is not a legitimate email. So now we would then go up to our DMARC policy in our DNS, and it will tell us what to do with that. So that's how those two things work together, is being able to define, is it legit or not? And then if it is or is not, we need to figure out what to do with it. And that's how those two work together in your DNS. That is what we need to know for this one. And in fact, for this one, it is not the plurality of you that got it right, because the DMARC itself, that record doesn't tell you what an authorized email server is. The record that tells you what an authorized email server is the Sender Policy Framework, the 32% of you that chose that particular answer. That was what we were looking for. That is the answer that makes the most sense of what we were going through. And in fact, if you were somebody who's working on email and you're working on anti-spam with your email, you're probably very familiar with these at this point, because pretty much everybody has SPF, DMARC, and similar records for that in their DNS server. So make sure you get those absolutely correct. Well, I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's see if we can slide in one more question that we have. This question, though, is not one that I created specifically for this study group. This is a question that comes directly from my practice exams book. Practice exams book is one that I wrote because I looked at all of the Security Plus questions out there on the market, and I saw a lot of things that I was troubled by. I saw a lot of practice questions from other parties that had the incorrect answers. Well, that doesn't help anybody. And then I saw a practice exam set from another organization that was all old questions that had nothing to do with the exam any longer. And I think people get confused by that. They think, oh, this is a harder exam. It's testing me on harder things. No, it's testing you on outdated things. It's testing you on things you don't need to know about. It's not harder. It's incorrect. It's not harder. It's inefficient and directing you down a path of knowing things that will not be helpful for you at all in your exam. Well, that troubled me. And I thought, how can we make this better? Well, the way we make it better is to write my own set of practice exams. So that's what I did. So for this practice exam, you don't have to go to professormesser.com/QA. I'm going to bring up this practice exam on my screen directly from the practice exam book, and we'll see if this is something that makes sense for you. So this is a question number A60. As many of you know, in my practice exams book, I have 3 separate practice exams in here. It's a big book. There's over 300 pages, 300 something pages, 379, 380. It's a lot of pages in here. And so we're taking one from page 21. You can see it right down here, page 21. The question asks, a company's security policy requires that login access should only be available if a person is physically within the same building as the server. Which of the following would be the best way to provide this requirement? Will we do that through a USB security key, a biometric scanner, a PIN, or through SMS? Those are the things that we can use for that. Now, this is a PDF, so we have the ability to annotate this. We can, if we have a stylus, we can actually write on the screen, or if we're trying to make notes on the screen and something that we would like to figure out, we can, of course, go through and annotate the information that's here so that we can go back and look at some of this information later. The answer, of course, in this particular case, the answer, if you just want to know whether it's A, B, C, or D, the answer is on page 33. If you would like a bigger explanation about the answer, which is what will look like, we need to go to page 98. We're on page 21 right now, and if you've ever worked with a PDF, what you don't want to end up doing is scrolling through the PDF and scrolling back. Instead, I put in hot links here. So where it says the details 98, if I click on that, it goes to page 98. So here's the question, A60 on page 98, and it tells us the answer is B, biometric scanner, because it tells us that a biometric scanner would require a person to be physically present to verify the authentication. Now, one of the challenges I always have with taking these practice exams is I always get the answer wrong. And so it's great when it tells me that the answers themselves are well, here's what the right answer is. But what if the answer is one that I chose the wrong answer? It would be nice if it gave me feedback on how I could redirect that if I was ever presented with these topics again. So in my book, every incorrect answer is documented. So you not only know why the right answer is right, you also know why every wrong answer is wrong. This might help you quite a bit because on your exam, all of these possible answers are from the exam objectives. And so the question you might get on your exam might be about USB security keys, or it might be about a personal identification number, or it might be about short message service. So these wrong answer explanations can often provide you with important details that could potentially end up on your exam. And I would recommend, if you're going through my book and you're getting the answers right, make sure you take a moment or two and read through the wrong answers just to verify in your mind that your thought process for what was right and what was wrong matches with the thought process that I was going through here. And if you've gone through this entire question, all of these answers, and you have no idea what I'm talking about, fortunately, at the bottom of this list is a QR code and a link built into the book itself that will take you to the video that was used to create this question. So that if you don't understand the terms, or you need a summary or more familiarity with the nomenclature and the terms that we are using, you can watch the video and then come back to this question and answer what this happens to be. And of course, since we're done with this question, we're now at the bottom of that list. My PDF reader, and yours probably as well, has a back button right up here at the top. There's the back button that is in my PDF reader. So I'm going to click the back button, and we're back to where we started. And we can go to the next question that's on our list. Those are my practice exams in my practice exams book. This book is available not only as for Security Plus, but if you get it with the course notes and you bundle those together, then you can, of course, get a little bit of a discount when you buy them as a bundle. These are also available in physical format. I'm holding the physical version. And if you purchase the physical version, you get the digital PDF for free. There's no additional charge for that. So while you're waiting on this to be printed and shipped to you, you can download and start accessing all of this information immediately. All of these are available on my website, along with pricing for both the digital and the physical versions. You can find out more at professormesser.com/securitype. Well, this is where I want to tell you about something that is one of the most valuable study materials you're going to find, and it's free. And I'm, of course, referring to the exam objectives. I've mentioned these exam objectives a couple of times already in the study group, and that's because everything you need to know about this exam is listed in the exam objectives. That is exactly where we would go for this one. You can see that we have summarized not only all of the larger domains that are covered on the exam, we also have a detailed breakdown of every topic we need to know. All of the bullets, their abbreviations, and now we know exactly what's going to be asked of us on the exam. Anything from this list could potentially show up as a topic on a question that we would need to answer. This is just the first couple of subdomains in domain number 1. If I go to the next set of pages, here's domain number 2. We have domain number 3, goes to 3, 4. It's domain 4, security operations. Security operations is big. And then domain 5, which is security program management and oversight. A lot of bullets in there in that list. And then after we're done with that list, we have a list of acronyms that you can reference as well if you're really into acronyms. I think most of the acronyms you'll learn organically. This is available to download from the CompTIA website for free. There's nothing you would need to pay to get access to this information, which, by the way, is very, very useful because there are not a lot of certification entities out there that are providing you with this level of detail. That's incredibly important. If you want to know where you can go to get these, I put a quick link on my website. If you go to professormesser.com/objectives, it will take you to, well, I'm not going to get there because I put the wrong information in on my side and being able to work with it. Let's do that. How about we do HTTPS? There we go. Should redirect there automatically. I'll make sure it does in the future. We've got all of these here. And you can see, by the way, that I have links directly to the objectives. They are on the CompTIA website. And I've got a little graphic here that says you kind of have to scroll down the page till you get to the red box on their website that talks about exam objectives and practice questions. So you've got there's options there. Make sure you scroll down because it will show you at the top a summary. You don't want the summary. You want to scroll down to that red box so that you can get there. Let's do that. As a matter of fact, we'll go to the CompTIA website. I'll pop open a new browser window and go to CompTIA.org. And we're going to click on certifications. Let's go to all. And they got a lot of certs. So we're going to scroll down to network or security plus, since that's what we're doing today. And it shows you, here's the Security Plus exam objectives. We scroll, and there's the red box we were looking for. I've already put in my email address, so it just showed me the objectives. It may put a box here where you have to put in your email, and then it will present these objectives to you, and you can download any one of those to be able to work with the official exam objectives. A valuable tool, and it's free. You should absolutely use that as you start your studies. This also makes a great checklist as you are finishing your studies as well. We do one of these study groups for Security Plus every month. Our next study group is going to be on December the 18th. We're not done today, of course. We have our after show coming up right after this, next on our list. But there's another one of those where you might want to stop in on December 9th and December 11th for our A Plus study group, December 16th for our Network Plus study group, and then December the 18th for our Security Plus study group. So you certainly have options to be able to work through and be able to know what you would need to know for the exam. It's a great way to study up as we are finishing up the year. These dates can sometimes change, so make sure that you check the calendars as you're getting closer and closer to these dates. I always keep the calendar up to date at professormesser.com/calendar, and I keep our Discord calendar of events up to date as well. I'll be adding those in over the weekend for December, just so you know when the next events are going to be. And if something changes, I will change it in those calendars immediately as well. Have a look at those. They are at professormesser.com/calendar. Well, we have made it to the end of another hour of a study group. Can you believe it? We're almost at the end of the year. This has certainly gone fast as we've gone through this. Don't forget about our after show coming up right after this. Don't go anywhere. We're going to immediately transition over to our after show where I will answer your questions. Anything you'd like to ask, we can do that. Don't forget to follow us on professormesser.com/Discord, or our pop quiz questions for Security Plus are on professormesser.com/X, and our entire Security Plus training course on professormesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about our vouchers and our success bundles. They're also available on our website. Use the links on your screen or use the link from the top of the Professor Messer website. We're going to be starting our after show here in about 15 seconds. Don't go anywhere. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour, and we will see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. Let's keep going through this list, there were a number of questions that came into the chat room as we were going through this. One of those questions popped up there at the end. Let's see if I can bring this up. There we go. Hi, everybody. A number of the questions that were there, some people were not able to see the red box on their screen. Could be that you have not enabled cookies. I don't know why the EU especially is very focused on cookies as being a bad thing. Yeah, I still don't know why. I'm still not sure why they're so fixated on cookies. We haven't had to worry about cookies from a security perspective for some time, but I suppose if someone was really enterprising and wanted to track things at a very detailed level, maybe they could misuse cookies, as if we didn't know where people were going on the internet using other methods anyhow. It's a bit of a challenge, but it's another one of those you have to think about. Make sure you have cookies enabled, or make sure the browser that you're using is properly using JavaScript. Sometimes people inadvertently turn on a lot of different security features that may or may not be necessary for what they are doing. Let's now shift gears a bit. It's time for our after show. So I am going to switch over to our Q&A section of the after show. If you're somebody who is interested in the things that we are doing with all of this, you can join us in the after show. Of course, I will be answering the questions live. You don't have to do anything for that, but you can certainly add more questions to our list at any time by following the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and you can submit those questions using the tabs at the top of your screen. There are a number of questions that already come in. I'm going to be sifting through those questions, looking through the ones that you've submitted already to see what questions you would like me to answer. These could be questions, as I mentioned, about technology, about certifications, about IT, or even about anything else that's going on. You're more than welcome to ask any question you'd like. I don't know that I will answer any question that you would like, but you can certainly ask any question you would like using the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. So let's now talk about the different questions that you have on your list. We'll start with the one. This is a very popular question in the market generally. I get a lot of emails every week about topics like this, so this might be a good place to start. Let's start with a question from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, I'm getting frustrated at the IT job market. Should I take a break from applying and just focus on increasing my technical skills and gain more certs / go to grad school? We're just trying a bunch of stuff. And Anonymous is in the middle of the craziness that is the job hunt, and not just technology, but almost any sector as we are right now in the world working through this. A lot of things have happened in the last year, especially around AI. We've had those tremendous highs where everybody was thinking that it was the next big thing. Now we're sort of leaning the other direction where we're thinking, well, that didn't go as well as we thought it would go. There might be other things that we might want to consider instead of AI and putting our money into something like that. Maybe we should put it into things that, work. And so other companies have kind of come off of this grand idea of the world changing and the computers doing everything for us so that we never have to work ever again. How'd that turn out? Yeah, me either. So I'm finding that although many companies have leaned a little bit outside the scope of hiring over the last number of months, we're seeing a little bit of movement there. And maybe that will continue to improve as we get into the new year, because as companies need to do more projects, as actual work comes up, you will need smart people to do that work for you. And with technology, as we've clearly found, you just can't automate everything. You still need some type of human brain to be able to identify and complete these tasks that clearly computers simply aren't smart enough to do. So I would say there's no reason you couldn't do all of this at the same time. Should you take a break from applying? Why would you do that? If you need a job in IT and there are jobs in your area that you feel you are qualified for, you should put your name into those jobs. The one thing that you are probably going to want to get even more comfortable with is rejection. As I tend to say, I'm still dealing with that every day. I'm on the internet. Rejection is a normal part of life. But I think if you haven't gone through the job hunt ever of any kind, you may not have been at this level. It's difficult because we want to fall in love with these dream jobs that we find. But in reality, there's the grass, although it seems very green for that dream job, doesn't always tend to work out the way we would expect. I would say perhaps a more tempered view of getting a job in IT might be a better idea. That way we're not dealing with emotional highs and emotional lows as we go through what is clearly a very challenging job market right now. So I would say keep applying. If you see a job that fits for you, there's no reason you shouldn't apply. If they say no, they say no. You just go to the next thing. I do have a series of videos that I've done that help you through some of the bigger challenges with updating your resume. It's 5 reasons your resume keeps getting rejected and 5 more reasons your resume keeps getting rejected. It's in the YouTube video description of this video. And it's some tips and tricks you might want to think about. Things like having a customized resume for every job that you submit to. So that's something a lot of people don't do. They create a very generic resume and they just send it in. Another one I mentioned is having a good cover letter. Not just a cover letter, I said a good cover letter, which is very hard to find. Cover letters are absolutely accepted by employers. They read through them, and if you don't use one, you're missing a chance to highlight yourself, to tell them why you should look through the rest of this resume. I give some examples of cover letters I really like. There's a standard cover letter I love called a T-style cover letter. That's something that I talk about in that video, and I describe a way that you could easily create a T-style cover letter in a very short period of time. So that's another one you might want to think about. So it's not necessary to stop your job efforts. Go ahead and keep going through the process of applying to these positions. I don't necessarily think a long-term commitment such as a grad school would be the best way to react to the current job market, especially since we're starting to see a little more movement there. And in reality, are employers even asking for a master's degree? In many cases, entry-level IT positions don't always, or in some cases very rarely, need anything like a master's degree. So I would say spending more money on grad school, spending more time in grad school, and making that commitment, it's going to put you much farther in debt, and ultimately employers may not need that. The best way to do this is to see what employers are asking for. And I have a video also that's in the YouTube video description of this video called How to Get a Job in IT with No Experience. And I give you a series of tips and tricks, what I call elements, 4 separate elements that I think are the most important when you're putting your name in for one of these positions. And I would bet that very few of you have all 4 of them. I think many people do, but I would think the majority of you probably do not have all 4 of the elements that I talk about in that video. And if you want to know what the elements are, go have a look at that video. It's in the YouTube video description of this video. It's called How to Get a Job in IT with No Experience. Well, Anonymous, thank you for sending that in. Don't worry about the job hunt. Don't worry about whether somebody is going to choose you or choose someone else, or how the job process is going, or what you need to worry about. You simply keep submitting your resume to the jobs that you know you're qualified for, and it's a numbers game at that point. You have the right strategy. You position yourself the right way. You have a customized resume. You've got a cover letter. You're following the 4 different elements I mentioned in my video. There's a lot of different things that are really, really, really going to help you in the job hunt. Keep doing that. And eventually the market is going to catch up to you, I think is how it's going to go. You just need to be ready when the market catches up. And this is not the first time our industry and other industries have gone through this. It tends to be very cyclical. Do not worry. We're going to be laughing at this later on. Years from now, we'll be talking about how IT jobs are everywhere. And remember those days where everybody thought it was going to be AI? But what were we thinking? I think maybe we're already there. Maybe we're close to there. We'll find out. We'll have to see what happens after the beginning of the year, won't we? Thank you for submitting that question. There is more questions that you are submitting. Thank you for sending these in. If you'd like to submit a question to me, you can do it at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your question. We were talking earlier about continuing education units and using those to be able to renew your certification. And got a question about those from Amy. Amy asks, while a person is in college for cybersecurity and an IT major, could they count the study that we do there, these classes, the training that we're getting, can we count those as continuing education? I don't know. Let's find out, shall we? I do know, but I'm going to tell you how we can answer this question, because we're going to go to the CompTIA website. Here it is. I'm on the CompTIA website right there. Let's have a look at certifications, or maybe it's under resources. Resources, is it? We were looking at this the other day. It's under resources up here at the top. You can see it. There it is. And under resources is an option for continuing education. Learn more. Well, I sure do, which ironically is what continuing education is. We would learn more. And it tells you, why do you need to renew? Learn about the renewal process, choose your renewal path, and submit your CEUs. Let's choose your renewal path, because that was the question that Amy asked. Could we use the classes we're taking in college and kind of double dip? So we not only get this class and we get a grade for the class, could I now also use that as CEUs? Well, let's go to renew with multiple activities, and I'm going to choose the option here for training and higher education. Higher education, not what you're thinking. We're talking college. That's what we mean by higher education, people. Training and higher education. You could complete a training course, attend a live webinar, attend a conference, complete a college course, or complete an American Council on Education course, an ACE course. Never heard of them, but there they are. Complete a college course. I'm going to click on that. It's going to scroll down the screen, and it says that I can earn 10 CEUs for each 3 to 4 credit hour class. So if you take 3-hour classes during a semester, that would be 30 CEUs. If you take 4, that would be 40 CEUs. For Security Plus, you need 50 CEUs to renew your certification, if that's how you're going to renew. There's a lot of different ways to renew. Collecting CEUs is just one of those ways. It does say that we have to complete the college course during the 3-year renewal cycle. At least 50% of the course content must relate to one or more of the exam objectives. There's hundreds of objectives on the Security Plus exam. 50% of the course has to relate to one of them. This is a pretty broad set of requirements. Almost any security, any IT course is going to apply here anyway. It's important to keep in mind that CompTIA does not only look at content topics to determine whether a course relates to exam objectives. There are other variables, including the cognitive level of course content, that are taken into account during our internal review. Well, I don't know what their cognitive level of course content, but they probably want to make sure that you really are studying the kind of content you would expect to study in a college. You're not studying elementary school security features. You're studying college level security. And it asks you for details, specifically a description/outline of the college course and a transcript containing this information. And there you go. There's your CEU that you've now gotten because you were able to take a college course and apply that. There are also other types of ways to earn CEUs. You can go to that page on the CompTIA website, and you can find a number of different ways to gather and take those CEUs for what you plan on doing. Let's keep going through your questions that you have submitted to me. Again, you can submit questions at any time with the link on your screen at professormesser.com/QA. This is a question that I think we might get a lot of different answers from, but I'll give you what I think my answer is, and then you can figure out one that might be your own, which means this is good because there's not a wrong answer necessarily to this question. This is from, again, my good friend Anonymous, who asks, what should you do a day before or during the day you take the exam? I get this often the day of an exam. In fact, a number of you in the chat room have said, I'm taking my exam today. What do I do right now? What am I doing right now? Well, I think a better way to ask that would be about a week ago. 5 to 7 days ago, that's where you should take a step back and think, what do I do to prepare for this exam that I'm taking in a week? And I think for many of us, I think the answer to that is the exam objectives. Why would that be the exam objectives? Well, I'm glad you asked this. Let me bring up a set of the objectives so that we could parse these out a bit. I made a mistake of closing my objectives out. So your exam objectives tell you everything you need to know for this exam. It takes you through what the exam is, why you would need a Security Plus certification. It talks about how you would need to have this scored, what type of experience we think you should have, and the different areas, they call them domains, on the exam that you need to know. And then it steps through each individual topic. And as I often say, if you can describe this topic to yourself or someone else, then you probably got that one down and you can mark it as something you would know. Maybe the things you know, you can mark as green. Maybe the things that you're 75% good on, we can mark as yellow. And if there are topics that we simply cannot recall and you're thinking, oh, I'm not sure what that one happens to be, maybe there are different topics that we might mark as red. On my PDF reader, it's pink. Mark those as red or pink. And now I have visually a series of topics that would be perfect for cramming in that last week. Because the green stuff I know, we can throw those out. Maybe most of this is green, but if I'm running into a red, maybe I start studying the red ones first, because those I really didn't know. If I could get some knowledge of them, that gives me a chance for getting those questions right on the exam. Like maybe I can move those up to a yellow. And of course, after we're done with those, maybe we go to the yellows, maybe we can move those up to a green. That's a great way to use your time very strategically before taking one of these exams. And that's what you have at that point. It needs to be strategic because time is the fire in which we burn. It is a limited resource. And if we are a week ahead of our exam, we need to be able to study as efficiently as possible. You still have the option, of course, to reschedule. I think you've got a 24 or 48 hour rescheduling time frame where you can change the date with no penalty. So if you are a week ahead and you've gone through this list and you find 75% of this document is red, then maybe you're not ready to take the exam yet. Maybe instead we change the date of the exam to be another week out or another 2 weeks out, and we focus on these exam objectives. So that's what I would recommend too. And I will also tell you, because people will send me notes about this all the time, the rescheduling process on the CompTIA website doesn't seem to be foolproof in that it allows you to set a date, but there's an additional process of locking it in or authenticating it or something that officially moves it to the new date. I get emails all the time where people have changed the date, and then when they log back in on the date they think they are taking their exam, they find out that it never really moved their appointment. So one of the things I always tell people is if you're going to change the date and you're going to push that out a week, log out, immediately log back in and check to see if it took. See if it's really got your new date in as that list. Get a screenshot of all this information, store all of that. That way, if there's any confusion or any problem later, you have some documentation that you can go back to, and nobody's going to complain that you simply didn't show up for your exam because you clearly changed the date of your exam and you have the confirmation page on your screen. Another one of those things to think through. So I think this would be a great way to spend your time. Go to the objectives. Why would you spend such a very focused set of time on these objectives? I'm not even telling you to go to other materials yet. Don't go, really stick to this list. CompTIA sticks to this list like glue. If there are going to be questions on your exam, 99.9% of those questions come directly from this list. They very rarely, if at all, deviate from the exam objectives. That's how important this list is. And that's why I tell you that if you've gone through the process of studying your exam objectives, you've used that as your checklist, then you're not going to have any problems on your exam. You're going to crush your exam because you've studied exactly what CompTIA is expecting you to know for this exam. Make sure you are familiar. Now, other people are giving some very good recommendations in the chat room regarding other things you can do during that final week or final day. A lot of people have good answers like rest. Having and going out and having a party the night before, probably not the best way to study for or prepare for your CompTIA exam. You should have plenty of rest. You should focus. You should have plenty of time to get to the exam center and have a strategy. I mentioned a number of strategies in my Exam Hacks ebook. You probably have strategies that you use during the exam itself. Find the way that is most comfortable for you. I think that would be the best way to prepare. Let's go through some more questions that you have submitted. Pop these up on my screen. How are we on time? We're doing great on time. Let's see what we happen to have. Again, you could submit those questions with the link you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Let's talk about me, which is one of my favorite topics. Not because I want to, because they're making me. As part of the question that comes from the Andy Griffith Show, we've got Goober who sent in the question that said Goober's apparently getting out of the auto repair business and the gas station business, and says, as a beginner in cybersecurity who has no prior IT experience, I was wondering two things. A, how you came into the space, your experience, and what kind of jobs you've worked in the past. And B, what you would suggest for anyone like me to do if they're trying to score an entry-level role, which would be a SOC or anything else in technology. So let's take the first question first and talk about me, shall we? My path, and really anybody's path into the world of IT, could be very different than anyone else's because there is no rail. There's no specific path that works for everybody. If you were, for example, getting into medicine, maybe you wanted to be a nurse, you would go to nursing school, you would pass your nursing boards for your state, and that would license you to be a nurse, which means you can't be a nurse until you're licensed. You are not legally able to be a nurse. I guess you could be an illegal nurse, but you cannot be a legal nurse until a registered nurse until you have passed that very specific licensing by your particular governmental agency in your state. So that's a very good example of how you have to go through that path to even be considered for that role. It's not like that in IT. We don't have regulations that could allow or prevent you from being in an IT role simply based on whether you took a class or passed an exam. And that's why it's a little bit different than medicine. It's a little bit different than even cutting hair. Cutting hair has all of these licenses and requirements. I don't know why. Not that it's a huge concern of mine at this point of my life, but it's one of those where people have to go through such strenuous testing for something that maybe doesn't require such a strenuous testing. Fortunately, I think IT, we've got a pretty good balance, and we use people's knowledge of the industry, their industry certifications. Maybe we use some of their formal education, and we use some of their practical experience. We combine all of those things together, and we make our own decisions on whether that person would be a good technologist or not. So in my world, the way that I got into the world of IT was through a number of different steps. So this is my path. And as I mentioned, your path could be very, very different. You just need to decide what that path happens to be. In my case, I got a formal education to start with. So I got a college degree. Admittedly, I barely got a college degree. I was not a very good student in college. I was a very bad student in college, but I stumbled through enough to be able to earn a bachelor's degree in management. Not even in MIS, which was the technology certification or technology major at the time, was management information systems. Didn't get one of those. It was mostly at the time just doing programming and taking business classes. And that's not what I wanted to do either. Wasn't interested in programming. That's not IT. I wanted to do IT things. And so instead of spending time in the computer science department or spending time as MIS, I focused instead on just traditional management. And one of the things I did throughout my college days is I had a job at the local college computing center. At the time, that computing center was large mainframes and supercomputers, and it allowed me to understand very broadly how people use these technologies, because I could see how the oceanography department was able to take large data sets and start crunching those numbers to understand how the waves and the currents of the oceans might change. I could see the meteorology department taking enormous data sets, putting them into the supercomputers, and starting to provide with very detailed analysis of what they predict a hurricane to do. This was back in the days where we really didn't have a solid understanding because we didn't have a lot of computing power. But then we started to see faster computers, bigger storage, and it's finally taken us to where we are now with big data. Now we don't just have one way to predict where we think our hurricane might go. We've got 50 different scenarios, 50 different algorithms that we could punch in to figure out where we think these types of systems might be, all thanks to the work that we've done through the years to hone and make models that fit best with what reality might be. So after looking at that, I thought, well, I want to get into this industry of technology and understand more about it. So right out of school, I got a job working as a field service technician with a computing company in South Miami, where I would replace motherboards, I would perform hard drive replacements, I would do warranty repairs, install new memory, anything that had to do with working in a PC. That's what I did as a field service. So I drive around the streets of South Florida, go from customer to customer, and be able to solve whatever problems they had. It was a great way to learn, and a great way to learn very quickly, because you're the only one out there in the field. You show up with your screwdriver and they say, fix this, and you really do need to know how to fix this. So it was a great way to learn very, very, very quickly. So I also have, from there, I was working closely with one of our customers that was an insurance company, and they didn't drive around all day. They were in one building. They arrived in the morning and they did all of their technology in the same building. I thought this was fantastic. As someone, if you've ever driven around the streets of South Florida, you also would think that was fantastic. And I did as well. And so I got a job working there where I could simply show up, go to work. And I spent 5 or 6 years at that insurance company as starting in their help desk, what they called their service desk, and then moved up into managing desktop systems, and then moved from there into managing servers. And from there went to move into managing the network and designing large network implementations across wide area networks. They had a very large WAN that was mostly domestic. They had some international WAN links. And that was great because you sort of learn how the computer works, then you learn how the servers operate, then you learn how the network operates. And once you have an understanding of the workstation, those operating systems, of the servers and what's required at a server level for those operating systems, and you understand how the network operates, you're ready for security. And that's what I did next, was move into the world of security, specifically a systems engineer for next generation firewall company. So that was a sort of an evolution of my career, a very short description of where I started and where I ended up. But that was the last job I had working for someone else, was as a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks. That taught me a huge amount about security because I got to see highest levels of security at some of the biggest networks in the world and some of the largest data centers in the world. And you really got to understand the challenges that they had, not only at a small, medium business level, but at some of the largest companies in the world and some of the things they had to deal with. That was very telling. But you really have to, when you're at that level, you're really pulling on all of the knowledge that you've accumulated through your entire career. So everything you knew about operating systems, everything you knew about servers, everything you knew about networks, you were using in that role in the world of security. That's why I often tell people some of the higher end IT security roles are not things that you could simply jump into right out of college. You need to build a foundational bit of knowledge from there. So the recommendation I have for everybody throughout your entire IT career is to simply continue building that foundational knowledge. So if you're not familiar with Linux, if you've never touched Mac OS, if you really haven't spent enough time on Windows, go learn those operating systems. There's always something to learn. Here's an even bigger challenge. You have to know when to stop learning with some of these operating systems, because you could spend an entire career diving into the minutia of what Windows is. Windows Workstation, Windows Server, Windows Pro, Active Directory, the security mechanisms, how data is secured, where data is secured, how to perform forensics, how to do troubleshooting. Your entire career could be about Windows. But I would recommend getting a very broad and deep understanding of the basics of those operating systems and continuing to add additional technologies on top of that. So go learn everything you can about Windows, then learn everything you can about Linux, then learn everything you can about Mac OS, then learn everything you can about iPad OS, then learn everything you can about Android, then learn everything you can about iOS. And by the time you do that, there will be more newer operating systems that have come down the line, and you will need to learn those as well. At least enough to be able to use them, understanding what's working under the surface, and be able to manage and troubleshoot those. Once you've learned that, learn everything you can learn about networks. Networking is an incredible knowledge base to have because everything touches the network. And it's almost like being in the Matrix, where other people just see things streaming down the screen and they look like funny characters and they have no idea what it means. But if you're very knowledgeable in how these technologies and protocols work across the network, you can see everything. And it's very obvious to you what's happening. Other people, they have no idea what they're looking at. I liken it to, speaking of medicine, so if you're a nurse, you may have somebody performing a 12-lead heart evaluation, and they're looking at those screens and the strips of paper that come out that have those peaks and valleys, and something's going on. But for someone like me, I'm looking at that sheet of paper. I have no idea what that's telling me. I have nothing. I don't understand what that is. But if you're knowledgeable with 12 leads, you look at that paper and you can tell a lot about what's happening to someone. You know exactly what valve is creating a problem, where the problem is, and how bad it happens to be, all by looking at lines on a piece of paper. Same thing applies for protocol analysis. Same thing applies for network analysis and network troubleshooting. You need to be able to learn that world so that you can then apply the operating system and the network to the security side of things. So I would recommend that as well. If you're somebody who is wanting to get those types of jobs, you need to create a foundational knowledge. Now, you might be more interested in databases, so your foundational knowledge might lead you down the path of SQL Server or MySQL. Or maybe you're more interested in security and your path might lead you down the road of firewalls and intrusion prevention. Or maybe you love operating systems, so you become a Linux expert and you're managing and deploying and designing Linux-based networks. It really is up to you. That's one of the beauties of information technology, is it's never just one thing. It's always a number of different things that you get to decide on, because there are usually lots of jobs asking for a lot of different skills. So you could find the skills that not only you are interested in, but employers are interested in you knowing. And that's a good combination. That's the two you're looking for. You want to somehow combine what you would like to do with what people would like to give you money for, what they'd like to hire you. So make sure you keep that in mind too. It's some people will sometimes deviate and they'll go off on a tangent. No, I really like looking at the way that light is diffused through an LCD screen. Well, that's interesting, but can you make a job out of that? Probably not. You probably want to focus on something that's a little more mainstream when it comes to technology. And to be fair, what you decide today will probably change a number of times as you go through your career, as it did with mine. Goober also asks for section B of this question, what I would suggest for anyone to do if they're trying to score an entry-level role. And I mentioned this in that video I have as part of the YouTube video description of this video, how to get a job in IT with no experience. And it's a combination of things. And different employers are looking for different things. So there's not any single question that applies to everybody. But generally speaking, employers would like to see you have a formal type of degree, whether that's an AA degree, a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, usually not masters or doctorates, but you might find it employers looking for that, I suppose. That's a good place to start, is a formal degree. Not everybody has a formal degree, but employers like to see those. So I mentioned that. The other is industry certifications. Well, we're all pretty familiar with that on this particular live stream. Security Plus is a good example of that. You should get the certification that they're asking for. However, I see people all the time saying, well, there's a lot of great jobs out there that want you to have Security Plus, so we should just go get our Security Plus. What they don't tell you is those jobs also require you to have a strong foundation in operating systems and a strong foundation in networking, and they're not going to hire somebody right out of school into a position like that. Those are jobs once you have already worked in the industry and you've gained that knowledge and you have that foundation, then you can look at one of those security roles. So you need to also position this properly. I've said earlier in this live stream today that you need to find the jobs that you're truly qualified for. That's different than the jobs that you really, really would like to do. You really have to be objective when you are looking at these job descriptions and find the ones that get your foot in the door of IT. That's what you're trying to do as your first job. This is not your career. You're not going to be doing this the rest of your life. Whatever role you get as your first job in IT will be something relatively temporary. You'll be there 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year. And then you will be transitioning off to something that is an adjunct to that. It would be the operating systems or the networking or whatever it happens to be in your organization. So that's why I would think that's what you would want, is focusing on those efforts. Here's something that I often see people get really upset about, but really for no reason, is if you look at any job posting that's out there, it seems like they're looking for a unicorn. They're looking for something that really doesn't exist out there. They want somebody with 5 years of experience and knowledge of Linux and knowledge of Mac OS and has worked with Active Directory systems and has designed networks. They want the world in these job descriptions. But here's, as someone who's interviewed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people for these types of positions, I will tell you that because they ask the world doesn't mean that they're going to get the world. They're just simply asking and hoping they can find someone who is the unicorn to walk in the door that has all of these skills. But they know that it's very unusual that they would ever find a match that someone has every single one of the skills that they have listed there. So if you run across one of these jobs and it says, this job requires 2 years of experience in Active Directory, but does it? The only way you would really be able to tell if that's a hard rule for this job is to submit your resume. Don't discount yourself. You shouldn't be the one that is already sending yourself a rejection letter. Let them do that part. So if you really feel that that job is something that you can do, send in your resume. You should apply to that position. Let them be the ones that then come back to you and say, nah, it's not really the best match for us. Okay, we'll just go to the next one. We're not stopping this process anyway. When we submitted that application, we submitted 5 others as well to other organizations. So we're not really locked in to any one of these. We're not waiting to hear back from somebody before submitting our resume for another position. We're constantly sending those out. So I would tell you to not worry so much about what they feel these requirements are. You should send your resume in anyway, and then maybe they will tell you that, yeah, it didn't meet our requirements, or you may find that they're asking you to come in and do another interview for something like this. As it turns out, maybe that 2 years of Active Directory projects really wasn't as hard and fast a requirement as ultimately they expected it to be. So send in those resumes. Put that information in front of them. One of the things that people mention all the time, and we'll mention this as well, though Goober didn't ask this specifically in the question, some people have mentioned this a couple of times in the chat, is that there are a lot of third parties out there that are acting as recruiters these days. Fewer than there used to be, but they're still out there. A good recruiter, first, is very hard to find. And especially these days, it seems like there are fewer and fewer really good recruiters out there. What a recruiter is someone, they are someone who is usually a third party. They don't know you. And very often they're not very familiar with the employer. They're a headhunter. They're trying to find people that might fit into these positions. The way it usually works is if they find someone, they present them to a company and you get hired, that the recruiter will get a percentage of what they are, what they're planning to pay you during that first year. You'll still get your full paycheck, of course, but if you are starting a role and you're going to make $50,000, maybe they get 10% of your salary amount as a finder's fee. That's the amount that they get paid as being a recruiter. There are other types of systems. Sometimes it's an internal recruiter. Companies will hire people to be a recruiter. That way they don't have to pay them a finder's fee. They just pay them a salary, and they're constantly looking for people. And there are some recruiters out there who are just horrible, that are only trying to gather information from you and have no particular jobs that they are planning to offer to you. That seems to be the majority of them these days, it seems. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I seem to get that feel that a lot of the recruiters are just trying. I think a lot of recruiters, it's an easy entry-level position. I think a lot of them are not really designed or have a familiarity with technology. And I think it shows when they try to find people to fit into a role. I've heard lots of stories and people sent me messages on how they're looking for that first job in IT, and a recruiter keeps presenting them with programming jobs, as if programming is the same thing as information technology. It is not. It's not even close. In IT, we don't do programming. We don't develop applications. We write scripts. We build automation tools. We make things a little bit easier to do. But that's not programming. That is scripting. That's automation. And if you want to draw a line there, that's where I draw it, because computer science is a completely different science unto itself. It is one that focuses on building applications, building hardware, and the software that runs that hardware. That's a completely different world. We don't do that in IT. We focus on keeping systems running, keeping operating systems going, patching those systems, maintaining the data, keeping those systems safe, and keeping them available for everyone to use, which in itself is also a completely different science that you need to be familiar with. So that's what I would tell you as well is, don't worry so much about the specifics that employers are asking for these jobs. If you feel that you are qualified for that role, you should send your resume in. You already know someone who works there, right? That might help you. That's one of those elements I mentioned earlier. And if you don't know these people that are working at these companies, then you haven't been to a Cisco user group meeting, a Microsoft user group meeting, a Palo Alto Networks user group meeting, an ISSA meeting, or a regional trade show. You need to go meet the people in your area that are working at these jobs. You need to find out who they are. You need to find out who they're hiring. You need to ask them, I'm thinking of getting an entry-level IT position at your company. What things would you recommend that I focus on learning? That's a great question. Very often they'll even want your resume so they can send that into HR, because they might get a finder's fee. There's an employee referral program at their company. They might benefit from sending your resume into the folks in the HR department and ultimately in the IT department. So another one of those things that might be useful to consider as you're in that job hunt. It's more than just sending resumes in. We're way past that point. It's much more competitive than that right now. We need to think a little bit more strategically when it comes to how we get jobs in this industry. And those are just some of the recommendations I can give you. Let's find some more questions that you have. A lot here to pour through. So I'm going to mention or focus on a couple more of these that you might have. There are a lot to work through. This is one that kind of talks about where do we go for a particular series of tasks or a foundational knowledge. This is from Susie, who asks, with data centers popping up like weeds, Susie's from my neck of the woods, would you suggest getting certified in AWS after completing the trifecta of CompTIA? I'm in Ohio, which feels like the epicenter. Ohio is a pretty good spot, like right there in the middle of a lot of very large geographies, and really the middle of a lot of fiber lines, as it turns out. So we see a lot of those. We have a lot that are in the Virginia area. That's a huge area for data. because the federal government is there. That's sort of where we started creating a number of these cloud-based data centers. But the middle of the country is also a good spot because there's so few things that can go wrong. So I'm in Florida, which means we get hurricanes. And hurricanes, I don't know if you've seen hurricanes, they're not great for data centers. They tear up everything. You lose the power. So there's an issue there with connectivity and with power when one of these storms rolls through. We also have places, maybe California, although there are a lot of data centers in California, there's also concerns with the ground moving under your feet. And if you were in other parts of the country, there might be other challenges. If you're in Kansas, you have to worry about tornadoes, that type of thing. Every state, ultimately, every part of the country has some concern associated with that, but there are some parts of the country that are a little bit easier to manage than others. It's more about how many customers might be there, where that might be located, some of the prices that you would have to pay to bring up a data center in that location. I think it's one of the reasons Florida does have a huge number of data centers. And after a while, we kind of get into the mode of dealing with data centers, power, and really hurricanes in general in Florida. So should we get certified in Amazon Web Services? That's what AWS is. Amazon Web Services, Azure Web, and other web-based technologies. It's always a good idea to get some certifications because every organization has web-based services, has cloud-based services, most of them on the web. Some cloud-based services internally. So having some type of cloud certification can really only serve to help you. The best answer to that, though, is not from me. I can't make the decision on whether you getting an AWS cert makes sense, but you can, because you can go look at all of the jobs that are available in your area, and you'll be able to see what those job postings are asking for. You might find that all the job postings want to have some type of AWS certification, or you may find that none of those have an AWS certification. Maybe everybody wants an Azure cert because they're all Microsoft shops. Okay, well, maybe we'll go get an Azure cloud cert. You get to make those decisions, but you should make them based on what you would like to do and based on, perhaps more importantly, what an employer is willing to hire you for. Sometimes positioning yourself well for the employer works a little bit better in your favor. So another consideration for those of you that are working through that. Make sure you have a look at what employers want. I think AWS is probably a good bet, but it might not be for your area. They might be wanting something different. Have a look at what employers would like, and I think that would be a good way to spend your time and create that strategy. I can already see you're creating that strategy for what would be the best way to position myself for this. And I think that would be a very good way to do it. Let's keep going through this list. Keep going down the line. You guys have submitted some great questions. How are we on time? We're at the top of the hour. Let's get at least another question in before we have to shut this thing down. I don't want to go too long with you, but I've got a number of questions that have come through and the things that you are focusing on. This is really a good set of questions. People are kind of trying to position where security fits into the big scheme of things. And they're trying to base it on a number of different topics that are there. The one that I would recommend, and in fact, I'll sort of mention this. I talked about formal education in this list, and there were a lot of questions that came through about formal education. But there is, since we had this last question about the cloud, I wanted to kind of talk about that just a little bit because there's not just cloud certifications, but certifications that I would consider more of an adjunct to the cloud certifications. This is from Corey, who says, besides the Security Plus, what certs or other training would you recommend for someone with an interest in cloud security? Is Cloud Plus worth getting? How about Linux Plus? How about SecurityX? CompTIA has some great certifications when it comes to those technologies. And I think a cloud-based cert is an obvious requirement. If you want to get into cloud security, you need to understand how the cloud works. That's kind of basic. That's a 101 type answer there. But the other part of that is that the cloud is more than just cloud-based technologies. If you're interested in automation of the cloud, orchestration of the cloud. Those are important to know. If you want to understand how to orchestrate elasticity into a cloud distribution, into an app that is being distributed in a cloud format, those are great technologies to know. Those are the things you would learn in a cloud-based certification program. But the cloud is more than just cloud-based technologies. Inside the cloud, we are running operating systems. We are running security tools. We are running encryption mechanisms. We've got VPNs set up. We've got additional cloud security functions built into not just the cloud, but external systems. So it's more than just the cloud. Knowing Linux, incredibly important. Knowing Windows, incredibly important. Knowing networking, understanding how to design large-scale networks is incredibly useful for cloud technologies, because you may find yourself needing to redesign how your cloud all connects to each other. This is something that gets very complicated very quickly. And so when I tell people, yeah, getting a cloud cert is always a good idea, but don't forget about the underlying technologies. We will always need people that are familiar with Windows. We will always need people familiar with Linux, or at least for the rest of your career. We need people that will be able to understand those technologies. We need people to understand how to build large-scale networks, to manage large-scale networks, to encrypt and protect our data, to keep systems up and running, and more. And so don't just focus yourself in a single segment. Don't just focus yourself in a single area of expertise. You need to be as broad as you can across all of these, but you may find that there are certain technologies that you really are focused in, that are really interesting to you. For me, it was networks. I got into networking and that was it. I wanted to know everything about everything related to the signal on the network, how we connect these networks together, the physical mediums, the copper and the fiber. I also wanted to understand everything about the MAC layer protocols, the layer 2 configurations, the layer 3 protocols that we were using, layer 4 information, and then understanding how applications communicate back and forth over this network. That's a lifetime of knowledge. It really is. That's years and years and years and years of time spent practically looking at thousands and thousands and thousands of packet captures and understanding what's happening with those. And once you get that level of knowledge, you've got it. It's not like you're going to forget that. You're now locking that in, and that levels you up in your foundational knowledge of technology. So the next logical step might be the cloud, or it might be security, or it might be databases, or it might be something else. Maybe something else that we haven't even thought of yet. There will be new technologies coming down the road in the next 5 to 10 years that we don't even know about yet. The same way that we didn't know what the internet was 30 years ago. We had no idea the scope of what that would be. And we had virtualization on top of that. Then we threw AI into the mix. Then we did cloud-based technologies. And you've got all these other things. There's going to be something else. What is that thing going to be? We don't know, but we have to be ready. And the way that you are ready for these new technologies is you build your foundation. So the moment that new technology shows up, you can pivot and become the expert in that particular set of technologies. And you will be one of the few people in the world that has now spent all of that time creating the foundation so that you can then build that new technology on top of it. Imagine coming into the world, and maybe this does apply for many of you, imagine coming into the world of technology and trying to understand everything there is to know about the cloud. It's almost overwhelming. It certainly would be difficult to be able to position yourself as a cloud expert without having any knowledge in operating systems or having any knowledge of networking. But if you already had learned that, you already spent the time in the trenches learning everything you could about Windows, learning everything you can about Active Directory, learning everything you can about Linux, learning everything you can about Mac OS, learning about what we are doing with networking. Well, now when this new thing comes along, when the cloud comes along, you're ready for it. When AI comes along, you're ready for it. Whenever that next thing happens, you will be ready for it. So my goal for you is ideally to get you that first job in IT or to get you a better job in IT. That's what we do every day. That's what we focus on, providing you with the tools, the resources, the certifications, and anything else we can think of that will get you into those roles. But we might also want to focus on preparing you for what comes next, whatever that is. We don't know what it is, but we know that we need to be ready. We often say that luck is really just a lot of preparation waiting for that right time to happen. That's really what luck is. If you don't prepare, you'll never be ready for that next thing. So that's why I tell people all the time, besides Security Plus, besides certifications, besides all of the things that we tend to focus on, all of the things that tend to be a priority for us, we need to build the foundation. And the better we build that foundation, the more we will be ready for whatever comes down the line, whatever that happens to be. Well, that brings us to the top of another hour and the end of another after show. I think that is a great place to stop for our November timeframe. If you are in the United States, we are coming up on Thanksgiving this week. This will be a great time to spend with your family. Think about all of these things you're doing with your IT career and maybe set up your own strategies for what you should be doing, especially as we hit the new year. I will certainly have resources, tools, and additional certifications that we're doing over in the next 12 months, and we will help bring you down and help you through that process of building your technical foundation. It's going to be an important part of what we're doing, not just here at the end of 2025, but the 2026 year and beyond. I want to thank you so much for joining us in that first hour of our study group. Thanks for being here in the second hour. We don't have any more study groups for November, but don't worry, we'll be back in December with our A+, our Network Plus, and Security Plus live streams. You can join our study groups at any time, and if you're wondering when the next one is going to be, you can visit our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.